Hey everybody, we are finishing up the treatment in my Gourami tank here. I've been treating it with Chemiclean for the last several days just to get all the gunk out of it and get it cleared out. But I wanted to start the video while we were in the middle of the water change because I'm only doing a quick water change. I'm not going to mess with the filter while I'm in there tonight. It's flowing very freely, so I'm not going to worry about it. I don't have a lot of time, so I want to just get the water change done with. But while the filter is still running and you can see how the spray bar is positioned, I know I talk a lot about air stones and circulation and power heads and all that kind of stuff, but this gives you a pretty good idea of how I typically position most of my spray bars. I keep them just under the surface, and then I have most of the outlet holes pointing sort of up and forward at about a 45-degree angle. This gives me a little bit of ripply surface agitation, very minor surface agitation. It's not actually churning any bubbles into the surface or anything, but it does create ripply, wavy effects across the surface. And then if you'll notice, I do have one section there squirting the water straight down, and that helps to carry some of the surface water down deeper into the tank. And then in most of my tanks, I will also have, on this end of the tank, I'll have a power head blowing across sort of the back and down across the bottom, and that keeps the water from moving, keeps the water moving across the back, and it keeps all the detritus and everything lifted up off the back and pushes it down towards this end where my intake is usually positioned. And that's kind of how I set up most of my larger tanks that have the canister filter with the spray bar on it, so you get a good idea of what it actually looks like while the tank is low on water. So I'm going to go ahead and finish doing the water change there, and once the tank's filled back up, I'll get some lights turned out to cut down the glare and all that kind of stuff, and we'll get a nice good close look at the tank, and we'll really get to see the difference between what it looked like before and what it looks like now after we've done the water change. So hang on, I'll see you in a minute. Alright, and that is the end result. Now when I started the treatment, the front glass was completely covered in algae. The Chemiclean would not have affected the algae, so I got in there and I wiped that down with a cloth the way I normally do before I even started the Chemiclean treatment. So now that the Chemiclean treatment's done, we can get over here and we can have a little bit closer look at all of this stuff. You can see how everything is sort of dead and gone. There is some damage left on the leaves where the cyanobacteria and everything was growing, but you can see that the cyanobacteria itself has shriveled up all nice and dry and brown. So I actually was able to go upstairs. I found video from when we first started treating the tank. I actually still had some of that video on file, and I cut a little segment out, so that'll give us a good idea of what this actually looked like before we did the treatment. So here's what it looked like right before the treatment. And so you can see that Chemiclean really makes a big difference. It just cleans the tank up in a generalized sort of way. It does clean up the cyanobacteria, but it does more than that. It cleans up all of the crud that grows all over everything and just makes the tank look nice and bright. So I use it in, I don't know why, but some of my tanks just never really seem to have issues or get, grungy on the inside, and then other tanks kind of do regularly. And then I've got a few tanks that I really, I'm always struggling with cyanobacteria in them. So, some of my tanks maybe 2-3 times a year might get a Chemiclean treatment, and then other ones get an occasional Chemiclean treatment, but it really does clean the tank up nicely and kill off all that stuff and kind of give you a sort of a reset of getting the tank growing back in and looking good. It won't affect your nitrogen cycle or anything like that. It won't hurt the plants. That damage you saw here on this Anubias is not from the Chemiclean treatment. It is actually from the stuff that was growing on there. Now, as it was growing on there and the Chemiclean was oxidizing it, the oxidation process might have had some effect damaging the leaves. I don't know, but it's because that was covered in cyanobacteria that the leaves look like that. It's not because the Chemiclean was in there. As you can see, those leaves that were new and didn't have nasty stuff all over them. They look just fine, as do all the other leaves that didn't have any nasty stuff all over them. So I'm quite happy with it. Now I'll get a good several months before I have to worry about doing that again. The stuff's really inexpensive, so having to do that, twice a year in a tank like this is no big deal for me. It's all just part of basic tank maintenance and keeping it looking good and pretty. And as far as that gourami you can see swimming back and forth there relentlessly, that is my thick-lipped gourami. I have been looking for more of them. From what I gather, it's not swimming around because it's unhappy with the tank conditions. It's swimming around because it's looking for companions. It apparently is one of the few gouramis that is actually gregarious, or likes to be with more of its own kind, I should say. And it's not necessarily a schooling fish, but it is probably looking around for either a mate or for other companions. And if I can find any more, I'm going to get them because it's a really, really cool little fish. It's really, really beautiful colors, and it's a friendly demeanor. It never really seems to bother anybody. Some of those little gouramis, even dwarf gouramis, can be really nasty and aggressive little fish, and this one does not seem to be at all. So oddly enough, I got it at PetSmart, and it seems like it was kind of a fluke that they're not going to carry it on a regular basis. I even have been asking the various managers when I've been in the store there, and none of them seem to have any idea where, if they're ever going to get them back in again or not. I don't know. So I might have to venture out a little further and go to some better fish stores that carry a larger variety. And maybe if I can find some of those little thick-lipped gouramis there, I can get, 4 or 5 more and get a nice little group of them swimming around in the tank. I think that would be fantastic. It's a really, really cool little fish. So there you go. My gourami tank after a Chemiclean treatment. I will put a link down below to the Chemiclean. I do recommend it. As I keep saying, I use it on a fairly regular basis, and it does a good job. Of course, everything will grow back, as it always does, but I liken that to mowing the lawn. You don't mow the lawn at the beginning of the summer and call it good. You got to get out there every week and do it, and that's just part of lawn maintenance. So, to me, part of tank maintenance is, once or twice a year, I got to get in there and do a Chemiclean treatment, and everything looks great again, and we'll have months of it looking good before we have to worry about it again. So, thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget, this one here is my gourami tank. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.